Welcome to EchoShade, where history whispers its darkest secrets and forgotten stories.
The story begins not in a palace, but in a quiet garden in wartime England, where the wind carried both music and sorrow. Her name was Noor Inayat Khan, born of royal blood, descendant of ancient kings of India, and yet she never called herself a princess. Titles meant little to her. Freedom meant everything. While bombs fell over London and men marched into war, Noor sat with a radio set in front of her, fingers trembling, heart steady. She knew what she was doing could end her life. But fear never ruled her. Silence did. She had seen too much of it in her own homeland, in her own people. And so, when Britain called for help, she answered. Not as a soldier, not as a queen, but as a secret, a shadow in the night, carrying messages that could change the course of the war. Every word she sent over her wireless was a strike against tyranny. Every code she transmitted was a spark of rebellion. Yet behind her calm eyes, she knew the truth. She was alone. Every mission meant a new betrayal, waiting to happen. Every whisper she trusted could be the one that led to her capture. They called her Madeline, her secret name. A name that lived in the dark alleys of Nazi-occupied France, where death hid in plain sight. But even as the Gestapo closed in, Noor refused to run. Sinaise, she knew her mission mattered more than her life. When others were evacuated, she stayed behind, not because she wanted to be brave, but because someone had to be. One night, as rain poured over the rooftops of Paris, Noor sat by a flickering candle, writing her final coded message. Her hands shook not from fear, but from exhaustion, from the weight of carrying a nation's hope in secret. She pressed the final key, looked out the window into the black night, and whispered to herself, "I was never meant to wear a crown, only courage." They caught her soon after, dragged her through interrogation, through betrayal, through silence, but she never gave them a word, not one name, not one secret, only defiance in her eyes. When they finally led her away, the guards remembered one thing. She walked like royalty, head high, spine straight, as if the world hadn't already decided to forget her. And though the pages of history tried to erase her name, some stories refused to disappear. Because Noor Inayat Khan didn't need a throne to become a legend. She just needed courage and a voice that no empire could silence. It began with a look that changed the fate of an empire. He was the King of England, Edward VIII, born to rule, raised to obey, and expected to love only the throne. But destiny, as it often does, had other plans. Her name was Wallis Simpson, an American woman divorced twice, outspoken, unapologetic, and everything the royal world was not ready for. Their eyes met in a glittering ballroom, surrounded by power, whispers, and judgment. And in that single moment, the crown became fragile. For the first time in generations, a king forgot the rules written in gold and listened to the beating of his own heart. The royal advisors called it scandal. The church called it sin. The newspapers called it treason, but he called it love. When the court demanded he choose, the throne or her, he hesitated not for a second. He looked upon the weight of his ancestors, the scepter, the crown, the centuries of blood and duty, and simply said, "I cannot carry it without her." The world gasped. For the first time in modern history, a king walked away from power, not in defeat, but in devotion. He left behind palaces, servants, titles, all for a woman who could never be queen. And in that exile, they built their own kind of kingdom. Quiet, fragile, beautiful, and doomed from the start. Because love, when it defies a crown, comes with a curse. In private, Edward often stared at the golden insignia engraved on his old possessions, symbols of a life he had abandoned. Sometimes he would smile. Other times, he would fall silent. Wallace, too, carried her crown, but hers was invisible, made of guilt and the endless echo of the question, did I ruin a king or free a man? History judged them harshly. Some called her a manipulator. Others called him a fool. But behind all the royal gossip lay something simpler. A truth so human, so fragile, that it threatened the illusion of perfection. He gave up the throne for love. And in doing so, he showed the world that even kings, with crowns of gold and hearts of steel, are still bound by something far greater than power. Her story began in light and ended in darkness. Noor Inayat Khan, the daughter of a Sufi mystic and a princess of royal Indian descent, was raised on poetry, music, and dreams of peace. Her father taught her that truth was sacred, that every soul carried a divine spark. He never imagined his daughter would carry that spark into the blackest corners of war. When the Nazis swept across Europe, Noor was living quietly in France, teaching children, writing fairy tales, believing the world could still be kind. But kindness was dying in the streets. People vanished, families were dragged away, and the sound of boots replaced the sound of laughter. So, when Britain called for volunteers, men and women willing to risk everything to fight tyranny, Noor stepped forward. Not because she loved war, but because she hated cruelty. They said she wasn't fit for the job, too gentle, too emotional, too quiet. But what they didn't know is that quiet people often carry storms inside them. She joined the Special Operations Executive, the secret network that sent spies into occupied France. She trained in radio transmission, the most dangerous job of all. A single message could mean life or death. One mistake, and the enemy would trace the signal straight to her. When she was asked if she understood the risk, she simply said, "If I am caught, I will never talk." And she meant it. Under the codename Madeleine, Noor was dropped into France by moonlight, parachuting into a country she once called home, now poisoned by fear and betrayal. And betrayal transmit coded messages from the French resistance back to London. Messages that could turn the tide of war. She carried her radio like a heartbeat, hiding it in suitcases, attics, and empty buildings. Every transmission was a whisper against an empire of terror. Each one risked her life. When her entire network was destroyed, London ordered her to return. She refused. She stayed alone, the last link between two nations. For 3 months, she sent messages alone in the dark, always moving, never sleeping in the same place twice. Her fingerprints were on every secret that helped the resistance survive. Her courage was the signal the world needed, but every code sent brought the hunters closer. The Gestapo traced her broadcasts, following the invisible threads of her bravery. Someone betrayed her. Someone sold her name. They captured her one night, dragged her from the streets of Paris into a black car that swallowed her voice. Inside the walls of the Gestapo prison, they thought they could break her. They tried everything: torture, isolation, threats. But Noor said nothing. Not one word, not one name. Only silence. The same silence she had used as a weapon in war. Days turned to weeks. Her captors grew frustrated. "Ishi's just a woman," they said. But she was more than that. She was willpower dressed in flesh and bone, even in chains. She was dangerous, because courage cannot be imprisoned. They moved her to Germany, to the fortress of Forchheim, a place meant to erase hope. For 10 months, she lived in darkness, hands shackled, body bruised, spirit untouched. She carved small marks on her cell wall, each line a silent rebellion, each mark a reminder that she was still alive. When the gods brought her food, she refused to bow. When they shouted, she turned away. When they struck her, she met their eyes. and they looked away first. In August 1944, as the war began to crumble around them, her captors made their final decision. No trial, no farewell, just an order. Noor was taken to Dachau concentration camp. She was forced to kneel, her hands were bound. And yet, witnesses would later say she stood taller than the men who condemned her. Her executioner asked if she had any last words. She looked at him, no tears, no anger, just a calm that terrified him. Then she whispered one word, "Elle liberté," and for a brief second, the night went completely still, as if history itself bowed its head. The world forgot her for years. Her name was buried under medals, files, and royal silence, but courage like hers cannot stay hidden. It seeps through the cracks of history until someone listens. And today, when her statue stands in London, a woman holding a radio, eyes toward the horizon, it feels as though her signal never truly stopped, as if she's still transmitting from somewhere beyond time, reminding us that bravery doesn't always wear armor and royalty isn't born. Sometimes it's earned, in silence, with a single word that outlives death itself. Some secrets are written in ink, others in blood. Centuries of royal power have always depended on one thing: lineage. Who inherits the crown? Who carries the blood? Who bears the name that can change the world? But what if one heir never made it to the throne? What if one name was erased so cleanly that even history forgot it ever existed? The archives of British history are lined with portraits, kings and queens gazing proudly from their gilded frames. But between those portraits, in the blank spaces where no names are written, there hides a mystery. It begins in the late 18th century, a time when royal marriages were not born of love, but of politics. Every union was a treaty, every child a transaction. But one royal heart disobeyed. Rumors speak of a forbidden child, born not in the palace, but in secrecy, a royal bloodline that could have rewritten succession. The whispers trace back to a young prince, lonely, restless, desperate for affection in a world of duty. They say he fell for a woman who was not royal, a commoner, a musician's daughter. They met in secret, exchanged letters written in invisible ink, and when she became pregnant, the crown intervened. The child was taken. No records, no witnesses, just silence, sealed behind the walls of the monarchy. For decades, historians dismissed it as rumor, but fragments remain. Letters half burned, portraits where a child's face is scratched out, a diary belonging to a palace maid, mentioning a boy with the king's eyes. Some believe the child was smuggled abroad, raised under another name, his existence buried to protect the monarchy's image. Others claim he died young, and the truth was erased to preserve the illusion of royal perfection. But there's another theory, one that chills the blood. That he lived, that his descendants walk among us even now, unaware that royal blood runs in their veins. A forgotten branch of the British monarchy, hidden not by time, but by choice. For the crown has always understood one truth. It is not enemies that threaten it most, it is bloodlines. Because one wrong heir, one living secret, can shake the foundation of an entire empire. Through centuries, such stories have appeared and vanished. A child smuggled to Scotland in the 1600s, an illegitimate daughter of King George IV in 1790, a hidden love affair during Queen Victoria's youth. Each tale dismissed, each record mysteriously lost. Lost. But whenever a truth is buried, the earth remembers. Letters resurface, portraits reappear, DNA whispers from the past, and each discovery raises the same question. How many crowns were stolen before they were even worn? In London's Royal Archives, there are sealed boxes no historian is allowed to open, marked only with initials, their contents unknown. But one archivist once confessed in a letter never meant for the public eye. There are things in these vaults that could change everything. A truth too dangerous to belong to history. The monarchy thrives on image, on perfect bloodlines and unbroken succession. But even perfection leaves shadows. And in those shadows, somewhere between scandal and silence, a forgotten heir may still exist. Not in palaces, but in the quiet veins of ordinary people, living lives built upon a lie the crown could never afford to tell. For every throne has ghosts, and some ghosts carry royal blood. There are moments when history doesn't speak, it whispers. 1,000 royal decrees were written, signed, and sealed in red wax. Orders of war, marriage, exile, and empire. But among them once existed a letter, one that never reached its destination. A letter written not by command, but by a heart. It was the year 1861. The empire was at its height. Queen Victoria ruled over lands so vast that the sun itself bowed before her reign. She was the image of power, steady, regal, unbreakable. But behind the velvet and gold, she was still a woman who had lost the only man she ever truly loved. Prince Albert's death shattered her world. She locked herself away in mourning. Black dresses, black veils, black silence. But what history never tells us is that grief makes people do strange things. In those years of endless sorrow, the Queen began to write again. Not proclamations, not laws, letters. Letters never meant for the public eye. One of those letters changed everything. It was addressed to someone history never confirmed, a name erased from the archives. Some say it was written to her Scottish servant, John Brown, the man who comforted her in her darkest hours. Others believe it was a message to a foreign monarch, a secret plea wrapped in love and regret. Whatever the truth, that letter was unlike anything she had ever written. No formality, no royal signature, just words that sounded more human than queenly. If I could rule only once more with my heart, I would undo what duty forced upon me. Those who saw it said it was sealed with black wax and hidden beneath her writing desk in Windsor Castle. But when the Queen died, the letter was gone. Some believe her son, Edward VII, destroyed it. Others think it was taken by her loyal servants, burned before anyone could use it against the crown. Yet, rumors persist that the letter still exists, buried deep within the royal archives, in a chest marked simply with the initials VR. Archivists who've worked in the vaults whisper that the box feels wrong, too heavily guarded, too quietly feared. For decades, historians have searched for its contents. One researcher, in 1953, claimed to have found a faint trace, a record of a personal letter withheld from accession by royal order. When he spoke about it publicly, his access was revoked the next day. The mystery deepened. What truth could one letter hold that even a century later must remain silent? A confession of forbidden love? A political alliance that never came to light? Or perhaps a truth that would have shattered the image of the world's most powerful monarch? In the royal halls, silence has always been a form of control. Secrets are not destroyed. They are buried beneath layers of history, locked away until memory itself forgets where to look. But letters have souls. Ink has a way of surviving time. And sometimes on stormy nights, when the air in Windsor Castle grows heavy, guards claim they hear papers rustling in empty rooms, as if someone, somewhere, is still trying to finish a letter that was never meant to be read. They say the crown protects the letter because it could change how we remember her. But maybe that's exactly why it should be found. Because the queen the world remembers was duty itself, but the queen behind that lost letter was something rarer. She was human. and history has never known what to do with that. The Tower of London has stood for nearly 1,000 years, its stones soaked in blood, its shadows stitched with whispers. Kings were crowned within its sight. Queens were executed beneath its gaze. And every night, when the tourists leave and the lights fade, the tower remembers. For there are some souls that never left. The story begins in 1483, a year that changed the heart of England. 2 boys, both princes, both heirs to the crown. Edward, just 12 years old. Richard, barely 9. Sons of a dead king, brothers bound by innocence and destiny. After their father, King Edward IV, died suddenly, their uncle, Richard of Gloucester, was appointed protector. He promised to guard them, to prepare young Edward for his coronation, and to keep the throne safe until the boy was ready to wear the crown. But promises in royal bloodlines often turn to poison. The boys were taken to the tower for a protection, the council said. A temporary stay, they called it. But days became weeks. Weeks became months. And the laughter of the princes slowly faded from the fortress walls. Then one morning, they were gone. No funeral, no witness, no explanation, just silence. The crown moved on. Their uncle Richard took the throne, and the boys were never seen again. For centuries, the mystery lingered like a wound that refused to close. Were they murdered? Hidden? Smuggled away? Hey, did the tower simply swallow them whole? Years later, in 1674, workmen digging beneath the White Tower found a small wooden chest. Inside, the bones of 2 children. They were reburied in Westminster Abbey under royal order, believed to be the lost princes, but DNA tests have never confirmed it. The truth still lies in shadow, and in those shadows, strange things have always been seen. Gods whisper that, on moonless nights, 2 small figures can be seen at the foot of the bloody tower staircase. Holding hands, their faces pale as candlelight, their eyes wide with confusion. They never speak. They only stare, as if waiting for someone to tell them it's safe to come out. Some say they hear the sound of soft footsteps, bare feet on cold stone, followed by a faint sob that fades into nothing. Others feel a sudden chill near the old prison door, where the air thickens, as if history itself refuses to move on. Every yeoman warder who has served long enough has a story. A flicker in the corner of the eye. A whisper that calls their name when no one's there. A glimpse of 2 children in royal silks, disappearing into walls that have seen too much. The tower is more than stone. It is a memory, every betrayal, every oath, every execution, woven into its foundation. For every crown polished in gold, there's another buried in dust. For every royal portrait that smiles with grace, there's a shadow standing just behind it. A voice that never made it into the books. The palaces of Britain gleam beneath the lights, but beneath their floors lie secrets older than any crown. Hidden letters, erased bloodlines, and whispers that refuse to die. Echoes of those who dared to be more than obedient, more than royal, more than silent. They were human. More than silent, they were human. And that, above all, terrified those who wore the crown. Because truth doesn't bow, and memory doesn't kneel. So the stories were buried beneath marble, beneath propaganda, beneath time itself. But even centuries later, their voices still rise. Through letters discovered in forgotten drawers, through portraits with eyes too alive to be paint, through ghostly figures that guard the tower at night. History never truly dies. It waits. It waits. It whispers to those willing to listen. Maybe that's why we keep returning to these tales, not to glorify the crown, but to uncover the people behind it, the ones who are erased and yet somehow still remembered. Every time you hear a name that history tried to silence, Nor, Wallace, Victoria. Every time you walk past a monument or a palace gate, or the silent Thames under a cold moon. Remember, someone once stood there, fighting to be heard. The truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to breathe again. And that is what EchoShade exists for, to give voice to the shadows. To remember the ones the world forgot. To remind us that history isn't a crown, it's a mirror. And when we dare to look into it, we don't just see kings and queens. We see ourselves. Because the past isn't gone. It echoes. And sometimes, if you listen closely enough, it speaks your name. Crowny, Choshade, the crown may hide the truth.